So what was that cheese called again?
Smoked black pepper.
Yeah, it's got this like weird flavor in my mouth now. Like, not that I need to scratch my tongue off or anything, but it's interesting. So anyway, let's go ahead and start another episode. What do you think, Laura? Should we start another episode?
Sure.
Let's start another
On that
episode.
note of cheese.
So, yeah. Well, cheese is good. Like, that's one of those things that across the board everybody can agree with.
Most people.
Maybe not types of cheese, like those ridiculously demented people that call American cheese cheese. That stuff's just disgusting. Like, why would anybody want to eat that on purpose? With all the cheeses in the world, they will eat those. That one. Whatever.
I think some people like its melting capabilities.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, we often have conversations about this stuff because we're both still in school and having to read all kinds of stuff all the time. And it's not that I enjoy reading it. It's just that I have to. But sometimes the content of the papers that we have to read or the journal articles that we have to read are pretty interesting. So what I would like to do for this particular episode is I would like to discuss one of the big topics of one of the journal. Let's try that again. The journal article and the
hand sanitizer,
right?
sanitizer.
Yeah. So we just start making up words. That's the way that real teachers do it. It's like you just kind of wing it, put together some words like impossible, and I don't have any more. Like, that's all I have. That's what happens when we record after working all day. I'm lucky I can still say cheese balls and Chromebooks.
Better than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Struggle with the words.
So I read this journal article that had to do with, so one of the big topics, and you and I talk about this all the time, and there's tons of research on it, is the whole idea behind inclusion, right? So the past couple episodes, we've talked about law, we've talked about IDEA, we've talked about FAPE, we talked some about LRE, and if you don't know what any of those are, go check out the other episodes. But at the very top of these conversations is the conversation of inclusion. And we've talked about it before in our short period of doing this, and that inclusion is pretty much is globally supported, right? Not just here in America, but across the world. There's this kind of consensus that we need to minimize discrimination as much as possible. And when it comes to the world of education and special education, that we need to give our students the best opportunity we can to receive an education that's going to help them as they move forward. And so a lot of this falls under inclusion. Well, what are some of the issues with inclusion?
Well, some of the issues are providing support in the classroom. You get outside of kindergarten and there are no paras.
Right.
And then the paras in kindergarten, they have enough, to trying to keep up with the students that are typically developing and doing the extra work that the work that they have to do. So then, you add in, excuse me, a student that may need some more extra support, and it makes it extremely difficult for them to focus on both and do it well.
Yeah, I mean, think about this is why I'll never be like a superintendent. But somebody thought it was a great idea to put 20-something kids in a classroom with 2 adults and have them learn. I mean, that's severely outnumbered. Yes, very tiny humans.
Some of them never been in a school setting before.
Right. Not all of them have gone to preschool.
Right.
And so that to me, that's And God bless those people that do that. I'm telling you, I mean, it was fun when I was subbing, but I don't know that I could handle. I'd be afraid. I'd be very afraid because there's so many of them, and they can surround you. But anyway, let's move on. So, talking about inclusion. So there's a lot of hurdles. But one of the ones that you'll find when doing any kind of research on it is that we have more and more teachers put in positions to teach in an inclusion classroom, and they have not been trained to do so.
Right.
So inclusion's been a big deal. So we can go all the way back to 1905, I think it was.
I think that's what we were saying over the weekend.
Or 1910, that's what it was. The White House Conference of Children, right? And this was all about education and providing the best, again, education that we can. And of course, as we progress as a society, more things become evident to us and we adjust and address and so on and so forth. But in this whole process, the special education population has just exploded. So looking at the 22-23 school year, according to the, Center for Educational Statistics, I think I said that right, 15.2% of the public school population is being served under IDEA. That turns out to be somewhere in the area of just over 7 million students that fall under IDEA, but it's pretty expansive. So kids getting special education services aren't just kids that are in classrooms like we teach, the self-contained classrooms, but most of them. So of that 7 million, I think it's somewhere like 4.5, close to 5 million are in the general education classroom.
Right.
And so what are some of the supports, right? So you talked about that one of the big issues is, not a big issue, but a truth is that there's not constant support, constant support in the classrooms all day. And so talk a little bit about that. What happens in the inclusion classroom?
Well, in the inclusion classroom, we have typically students of varying disabilities, and they're doing their academics, and they also have the social aspect of it. And so the teacher has to make sure that they are ensuring that their materials are on the right level for their learners, whether that be on target or if they're above average or if they're struggling a little bit. So the teachers try to make sure that they have something for all of their students that will be beneficial. And then there's oftentimes when you have students that have an IEP, typically that there are also some undesired behaviors that follow those students for various reasons. Some of them could be that they're immature because they're not developmentally ready to be where they are. Some of it could be their diagnosis itself, or their disability itself. Excuse me. Communication barriers. We also have cultural barriers. There's just a slew of things that come along with these students, and so when they're in inclusion, that teacher's trying to support all of these students, and typically, as you said, by themselves.
So, reading up on all of this, what I found is that there are common themes in every bit of research that I've seen. And the themes are these barriers that, like I said, are identified across the board. And one of the major barriers that I've read about, and then particularly this past weekend in the one article I was reading, it's talking about how teachers feel underprepared to teach students with disabilities. And that makes sense. Because you talk to most teachers, and if you were to ask them about the amount of special education study that they did during their pre-service program, let's just think about the traditional, the teachers that go the traditional route, right? They go to college for 4 years. They do student teaching. We've had the privilege of meeting some really great young teachers over the years, and I think there's only ever been a few that had intentionally taken some classes to have it added to their certificate as far as to be able to work with students with disabilities, but it's not necessarily the norm.
Right. Well, and even I think those courses are not necessarily in depth. So even though I think you're talking about the ones that get duly certified,
Right?
And it's an extra couple of classes, and from what we've been told, it doesn't accurately or effectively prepare them either, even though they're taking these classes.
And so what happens is we have all these kids with varying degrees of ability entering the classroom of a teacher that hasn't been trained on how to teach the spectrum of children in their classroom. And I don't know about you, but I know when I step into something that I'm going to be held responsible for and I have no idea how to do it, that drives me crazy. Like, it makes me think back. So when I was around 19, I had went and applied for a job at a Super 8 motel in Brunswick, Georgia. I walked in, and I was weird looking. I mean, I'm weird looking now, but I was weird looking when I was 19, like my black hair, and yeah. So anyway, I walked in, and I asked them if they were hiring. It just so happens I was up there with a buddy of mine, and they said, yeah, sure. So I got hired. They said, can you start tonight? I said, absolutely. I came back to work the night audit. I got trained for one night. And they're like, all right, here you go. To say that I was terrified,
right,
would be an understatement, right? I'm a 19-year-old kid that has no idea how to do this job, and you just said, hey, go ahead. So now, let's think, not to minimize people that work in the hospitality industry, but put somebody in a classroom with a bunch of kids and not have them trained specifically to deal with as many of those disabilities as possible. How would you not become overwhelmed?
Right.
I mean, that again, that's another one of those things to me that's terrifying. So as I'm reading through this journal article, it talks about how this lack of understanding leads to a real poor self-efficacy or a belief in what they can accomplish. And from that stems a poor attitude. From the poor attitude, it leaks out into everybody else in the classroom and really prohibits the academic gains that one might be looking for. And so my question is, and I'm just I'm throwing this one at you, we haven't even discussed it, is for the parent of a student that is in inclusion, that's receiving special education services through a co-teach model, or maybe they're just, I don't know, but where the majority of their day is in the general education classroom, what is something that we can share with parents that might help them be a little more understanding or compassionate when there's things that they don't understand going on in the classroom? Does that make sense? Like if they're getting a lot of calls from the teacher, or there's a lot of concern from the teacher about the student, what is something that we can tell parents to kind of keep in mind, or maybe even something to view the whole situation through that will allow them to be more compassionate and supportive?
I think one thing that they should consider is asking questions. Ask the teacher for clarification. I think a lot of times, and we go into things, and I'm guilty too, with thinking that I already know what somebody is thinking or the reason why somebody did something. And so what I try to do is I go into that conversation and try to say, okay, so can you tell me why this is like this? Or was this an issue? Or was there something going on in the classroom when you had this struggle? And then I think along with that too is that the parent, so asking questions, asking for some clarification. I ask, what do you need from me? Is there something I can do at home? Is there, something that I can send in, or is there something that you need? Ask the teacher those questions, and then also not just trying to understand, but also help that teacher understand your child. Share with them some of the struggles and some of the needs, but also some of the strengths, because I think we found that when we focus on the strengths of our children and our students, that they will kind of rise to that, and when they know that they're doing something right. So if you can, as a parent, let your child's teacher know that, okay, listen, so yeah, I understand that, he struggles or she struggles at this, but she's really good at this. And maybe if you give her, like if someone likes to lead, if you give her a job or a task to do, she'll follow through that. And then that will help that child feel good about themselves. So I'm really coming along besides that teacher, because parent-teacher relationships, I think, are becoming more and more thin, I guess you would say.
Fractured.
These days, yes. And because I think that, like you were saying, that sometimes the teachers, they don't know what to do. And then the parents feel, well, they just don't care about my child. And I think always looking at it, I think teachers and parents both need to take that view of, maybe I misunderstood something and not blame. Maybe it's me. I think that's one of the things that you've always said. Well, okay, so if I assume that I've got it wrong, then it's not on me if I'm not coming off being rude or disrespectful. I hope that made sense.
I don't know. I think I zoned out a little bit, but I know most of what I was listening to was really good. No, I agree. And I agree with what you're saying as far as that going both ways. I think one of the hardest things for teachers to do, especially when you're sitting in that IEP meeting and the conversation is a little tense, or there really is a major issue that you're discussing, it's very hard sometimes to say, yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Like, and to look at another teacher in the meeting and say, I don't know. What do you got? I don't know how to answer this question, or I don't know how to address this. And, I think that when we are willing to be open and honest with each other as human beings, right, it helps everybody in the process. And so what I would say to the parent is, keep in mind that this teacher probably did not have a whole lot of exposure to students with disabilities. Now, you can blame whoever you want to for it. You can blame the pre-service program. You can blame the district. You can blame the governor, whatever. But the fact right in front of you is, at this moment in time, there's probably some things that are lacking. And so what's necessary is to see parents come alongside and have some compassion. But then at the same time, you hold each other up.
Right.
So let's not make it about the parent versus the teacher and actually be that IEP team. There is absolutely nothing that suggests that our special education population is going to shrink.
Right.
Right. It's just becoming more and more, and there's more and more students in our Oops. I hit the table. In our general education classrooms that need more support. And I think that's something that as educators, as parents, it needs to be at the forefront of our conversations. I think when it comes to our kids with special needs, that there's a lot of students that have an IEP that will go on to live full lives. They'll get jobs, they'll have families. It's not because they have an IEP that they're on the severe side. And a lot of it is just, again, needing a little bit extra support. And so, as I was saying, we're talking about this article and the teachers not being positioned or feeling that they're not positioned to be as effective as they can be. Again, is another one of those things that you look at here. So it's here in front of us. We can talk about how to minimize that moving forward. But what do we do right now? And I would challenge anybody listening to this, if you're a parent that has a child that is receiving special education services in the inclusion setting, that go into it with the idea that you want to support that teacher. Teachers, be willing to ask each other questions. If you're a gen ed teacher that is doing the inclusion thing, spend some time and have a conversation with this special education teacher that's coming in with you. Bounce ideas off of each other. Reach out to other special education teachers. See what they're doing. Like, one of the best things that you can do is keep communication open and serve each other. Because when we start serving each other, then the weight of feeling inept or the weight of feeling, I have no idea what I'm doing, the weight of it lessens, because not that you automatically know more, but you got somebody walking it with you.
Absolutely.
And so the winner in that scenario are the students. And so anyway, this whole article went on to say, and I think I already said this, but I'll button it up, is that not only are the special education students missing out, the general education students, the typical developing, are missing out. Teacher burnout is at an all-time high. What we can't change is we can't change pre-service programs. We can't change what these colleges teach. We can't, do the whole I dream a genie blink thing and make people just know stuff.
That'd be cool if we could.
Wouldn't it? But instead, here's what we get to do. Be compassionate. Walk side by side with teachers and parents. Doesn't mean that every conversation is going to be a happy one. Doesn't mean that they always turn out well. But nothing can be better than a room full of people that genuinely care for this particular student. And I think that if you really care about them and you want to see them do their best, you're going to ask questions.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so that's where it always starts, is asking questions. So parents, love your teachers. Ask them questions. Be supportive. Teachers, be willing to say, I don't know, but I'll find out. Right? We can't take it all personal. We can't get flustered because we don't know, because we're always going to have things that we don't know. I've met some great teachers. My first handful of years, I got to work with some fantastic teachers, and I learned a ton from them. But they didn't get everything right all the time. And neither do the parents. So we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about a situation, when we're talking about a setting that could be very volatile. Compassion smushes all that down. People don't get to see what I'm doing with my hands, Laura. Only you. You're so lucky.
Yes, you're fanning. You're
I'm
trying to fan me.
Yeah, I'm like flapping like a bird. So, anything else that you would like to add to this, Mrs. Curtis?
No, I just like what you said about that two-way street, of communication and mutual respect and understanding, and do your best to try to understand what the teacher's saying. Do your best to try to understand what the parent is saying, and like you said, that the child's going to benefit, and that's what we're supposed to be here for.
Yeah, the stinking kids. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. You good?
I'm good.
All right. So you can check us out on social medias, a few of them, the Facebooks and the Instagrams. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can shoot them to us through those avenues, or you can email us at lifeintheieptribe@gmail.com. Did I say it right? Life in the IEP tribe. It's probably a lot easier just to go to the Facebook thing, click a button, and send us a message instead of remembering that super long.
I mean, it's just the name plus.
That's true. Okay, well, and so until next time, I'm Jared with my wife Laura, and we're saying goodbye.
Goodbye.